Mr. Simland, hope you've been doing well. I've seen you've been very busy with some of your speaking events and your YouTube channel and your Instagram and all that social media stuff. So I wanted to get you on here and have this chat because I think a lot of people would be interested in what you are all about, really, with biohacking, autophagy, intermittent fasting, just health, wellness. Even just with me putting on the Instagram story, I'm getting a lot of people asking a lot of questions. So I'll go through those after towards the tail end of our conversation. You can hopefully address some of those people's questions. But just to kick things off, do you mind briefly introducing yourself, what it is you're involved in, what it is you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I'm glad to be back on the show. And like you said, I'm doing essentially biohacking, which can be like a very nebulous term, and it can mean many different things for different people. But for me, it's essentially just optimizing my health as well as performance with the help of like technology, science, and this sort of natural way of living. And essentially I cover content about nutrition, different dietary hacks, different ways to improve muscle mass, burn fat, live longer, how to optimize sleep, and all these different types of ways of just being like a more functional human being and being healthier.
Mm-hmm. And what drives you to do that? Like, what drives you to reach your peak levels of performance and just be that top level functioning human being?
Well, yeah, like I think it's essentially just being very diligent with the time that I have in this world, so to say. So the most valuable resource all of us have is our time, and we don't really get it back. And usually, like the biggest regrets people have on their deathbed is that they're not living to their fullest, or they're just being regretful of some things they didn't do. So I don't really want to have that feeling, and I can already like a pre-forecast myself into the future that and I would know that if I didn't do something, if I didn't live up to my fullest potential, then I would regret it quite a lot in my later years. And I just don't, I kind of acknowledge to myself that in order to live a more fulfilling life and in order to be happier, then I would just have to take my time seriously and as well as my health seriously, so to say. So your health is probably the second most important thing in your life, and in turn, if you take care of your health, then you can actually have more time. You can live longer, and you can be more productive, and you will just enjoy the process much more thoroughly as well. But in the example of me doing content online, then I'm doing it as a way to just share my experiences and like earn a living out of it, so to say. That's why I've kind of created my own personal brand, and I'm doing this speaking and writing books and those sort of things and programs, so that I could just keep on doing it and kind of fully dedicate myself to this craft of like writing and content creation.
Mm-hmm. It seems like you do create a lot of content as well. Even your book on autophagy is quite thick. It looks to be pretty in-depth. And I wanted to ask you, do you find that you get a lot back from speaking with people? I know you spoke with David St. Clair recently, who's a health and longevity expert, which is very in line with what you do. So I'm just wondering if you get anything back from doing your research, from creating content, if you're constantly learning, or if you feel that there's sort of everything's already been learned to date in that field and there's not too much, it's a little slow. So I'm just wondering how much.
Yeah, well, I think I'm learning everything, or like I'm learning something every day, all the time, so to say, that there isn't a day that I don't learn like some mechanism in the body, or some study that you just came out, or whatever, or just learning more about myself and how my mind works and all the things. So it's definitely like a constant, never-ending process, and I think that's how it's supposed to be as well, because otherwise, if you think that you've reached this pinnacle of achievement, or that you've reached the ultimate knowledge and that you gained all of the knowledge, then that's the moment you're actually going to realize that there's so much more to learn. And that kind of like an arrogant mindset, it will often just bite back at you. And it's definitely much more important to stay more humble, but at the same time have the courage, or like the willingness to just keep on going despite the fact that it may be like difficult at times, and at times it can be like uncertain or confusing, so to say. You always have to kind of push through it and keep on going, just to like I said, because if you don't take action and if you don't keep learning, then you're never really like reaching your fullest potential, because your potential is like it's unachievable in the sense that there's always something to improve upon.
I find a lot of people do get static in their behaviors and just their lifestyle. They don't constantly try to evolve themselves. They see themselves as this fixed, rigid thing that's not constantly improving. So it's great that you feel that way. And on that note, I wanted to ask you if you have any goals that you currently set out for yourself. And the second question to that is, how do you go about setting goals for yourself?
Yeah. I usually do set like a few goals for like I kind of differentiate them or categorize them into different groups. Like there are, these large, I call them meta goals, your life purpose and those sorts of things that are achieved over the course of decades and centuries, so to say. And or you could call it like a legacy, that type of thing. But there are also like smaller goals, goals that you achieve over the course of the coming 5 years, and definitely annual goals, and then like monthly goals and weekly goals and that sort of thing. So for this remainder of this year, I've set myself the goal to try to reach 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So currently I've been at 92,000, and it's gonna be like a rush. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it, but I'm definitely not going to try to not make it. So I'm not gonna slow down. So I'm gonna definitely keep on trying to reach that goal. And when it comes to the next year, then I'll probably have the goal of publishing my next book. And I prefer more of like a systems-based approach of looking at what kind of systems can I create into my daily habits and routines that would just enable me to reach the goals on autopilot, so to say. So in order to write a book, then you have to have like a system for writing something every day almost. And if for example, in the example of weight loss, then in order to lose weight, then you have to do something every day that would help you to reach that goal faster. So yeah, like doing cardio, doing weights, tracking your nutrition, paying attention to stress and sleep. So everything has to be like a system in a sense that would support the achievement of that goal. And that's what I like to do, like on a daily basis, that I'm following certain structures and routines that essentially help me to reach those goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like how you alluded to the fact that you got to do this, whatever it is, every single day. So if you set a goal, be it weight loss or, achieving more subscribers or some sort of financial gain, it's like you need to work towards it every single day. It's not one of those things you can just put down and like stop uploading your content, because then you're obviously not going to reach that goal. So it makes total sense. So on the note of your content, you do talk a lot about autophagy and intermittent fasting. Some people watching this might not be familiar with what autophagy and intermittent fasting are, also known as time-restricted eating. Would you mind just elaborating on autophagy a little bit?
Yeah, well, autophagy translates into self-eating, and it's the cellular process where your old and worn out dysfunctional cell parts are being recycled into energy. So you can think of it as like taking out the trash, and this sort of housekeeping has many longevity boosting benefits, mainly just removal of waste and like this debris, but it also is very interconnected with many other cellular processes, such as like burning fat, reducing inflammation, fighting inflammation, and like neuroprotection and etc. So autophagy is it's like a very intricate part of healthy living at the same time, but it's also like useful for promoting lifespan and increasing longevity in many species.
And the basic concept of it is really you're just not eating for prolonged periods of time. Is that right? And then you're sort of having one meal or two meals for the day or over a 48-hour period. Is that how it works?
Well, you can activate autophagy in many ways. Like the main idea is to create energy stress and nutrient deprivation on your body. So you can do that with like fasting. You can do that with exercise. You can mimic that to a certain extent with carbohydrate restriction and ketogenic diets. But you can also do it with like drinking coffee or green tea and other these polyphenols. So yeah, there are different degrees of autophagy and different forms of it, like dozens of different types. But the main message is that like once your body is experiencing higher levels of energy stress, then that's going to gradually start to ramp up the autophagy process, because your body goes into like this survival mode almost, where it's, forced to salvage the energy and the other dysfunctional parts that it has, just, laying around.
Mm-hmm. And now, would you mind just letting an opinion on perhaps even dispelling the myth that when you do these things that you start to have, your body starts to eat away your muscle and you start to actually lose muscle mass? Because anytime I speak with someone that's not familiar with intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, or autophagy, they seem to think that, oh, don't you lose muscle when you don't eat? Don't you go into starvation mode? This is this huge thing that people always talk about. So if you mind just elaborating a bit on that.
Yeah, it can definitely happen to a certain extent. So if your body isn't able to tap into its own energy stores and backup fuel, then it's inevitably going to have to use some of its own muscle tissue and vital organs to create that energy. So let's say your body has primarily two main fuel sources, one of them being carbs and glycogen, and the second one being fat and ketones. So you carry around thousands and thousands of calories with you all the time in your body fat, and your glycogen stores, on the other hand, are quite limited. So up to 2,000 calories is the maximum for glycogen for most people. And whenever you're fasting, then your liver glycogen tends to gradually decrease. And once that is fully depleted, then you shift over into burning fatty acids and ketones for fuel. So ketones coming from your own body fat, they get converted into energy. And but the problem is that if a person isn't able to make that shift, then they're still going to be staying in that glycogen state of using glycogen for fuel. So they're in the quote-unquote sugar burning mode, and they're using glycogen for fuel. But if the body is depleted of that glycogen while they're fasting, then yeah, the next best thing for creating glycogen comes from converting muscle tissue into glucose through the process of gluconeogenesis. The problem is that if the person isn't able to shift into ketosis while they're fasting, or they're just not adapted to using fat for fuel, then the degree of muscle catabolism would be higher versus someone who is already used to fasting to a certain extent, and their body is metabolically flexible and efficient at swapping fuel sources. Then the rate of muscle loss and catabolism would be much lower. So the problem isn't that the body is inherently going to lose muscle while fasting. The problem is that most people aren't metabolically flexible enough to make the shift, so to say, because in the past, or let's say on an aboriginal diet or an ancestral type of diet where the carbs aren't overly abundant, and the people aren't eating excessive amounts of calories either, then for them the shift is naturally going to happen much easier, because they're never really going too far away from their the body's default setting, so to say. And in the modern world, people are just eating too many carbs, they're eating too frequently, and that decreases their metabolic flexibility, and therefore they suffer hunger in between meals, they suffer sugar cravings, they suffer brain fog when they skip meals, and those sort of things, and including muscle loss. But it doesn't really make sense that humans in the nature would experience those things, or that would have to happen, because our body is very adaptable to energy, stress, and starvation, where we've evolved over the course of eons of starvation all the time, and food deprivation. So it's just the aspect that the body has to be taught how to become more keto adapted and fat adapted, and to also just to become more metabolically flexible. And the way you do it is just gradually increasing that metabolic flexibility by doing some form of intermittent fasting, as well as exercise, and just being more mindful of how many carbs they're eating, and not eating just around the clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you kind of answered my second question there, was how would someone get involved into it? You're saying it's a gradual process. So what would be the starting point? Would they start with a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour eating window as a gradual start? Or do you think they should start with even a shorter fasting period?
I think it depends a lot on the person and what kind of a state are they coming from. So usually, if you're not having done any fasting beforehand, then it's gonna just be more difficult for you to get through the fast. And I think it would be just foolish to try to bang your head against the wall and try to make it happen. So I would always, I think it's more productive and more sustainable to gradually increase the fasting period to a certain limit, and therefore build up this sort of flexibility. But I think, skipping one meal a day is definitely like a good starting point for most people, and they would get used to it quite fast, although it may be uncomfortable at first. So yeah, I would maybe start off with definitely, like, even if a person isn't interested in doing intermittent fasting or something like that, then I think it's still quite rational and a wise idea to not eat more than you spend time in a fasted state, if that makes sense. So there are like 24 hours in a day, and you shouldn't be spending like over 12 hours in a fed state, because it just doesn't make sense. You don't naturally want to at least keep it at a balance, and preferably just extend the fasting period by a few hours, and going for 16 hours every day is quite effective. And it's also like, I think it would be like the optimal kind of balance between daily fasting, but even like just fasting for 14 hours would be like a good amount for getting like the minimal effective dose.
And I want to ask you about exercise, either while fasting or not fasting. Do you lean towards a particular modality of exercise, be it strength training or high intensity interval training or more cardiovascular style training? Do you have any preference, and what's the reason for that preference?
Yeah, well, I think in the modern world, especially, like the healthiest form of exercise is probably resistance training and strength training, because we're not like in our environment, we're not being that active physically. We're not moving around that much, and we're primarily sedentary. So in that kind of situation, and at the same time, we're like surrounded by more food and more calories. So it's very easy to get obese if you're not proactively doing anything about it. But with resistance training and strength training, by building muscle and strength, you're kind of creating a bigger buffer zone for you to get away with things. Like muscle just burns more calories, and muscle also makes you more insulin sensitive, so you can eat more carbs without those carbs negatively affecting you that much. And essentially it's easier to stay lean and healthy. So one of the worst things, or any diet can be useful and good and healthy for you if it's helping you to maintain like a lean body composition and you're not overeating calories. So any form of diet can, and most of the diets work through this mechanism, that they enable the person to maintain like this lean body composition and eat around like their maintenance calories, so to say. But with resistance training, you're creating a larger ceiling for that. And in addition to like body composition, muscle mass is also very useful for general longevity. So as you get older, you're losing your muscle mass because of becoming more resistant to protein intake, as well as becoming more sedentary and losing like all the other muscle building hormones, or decreasing them. And just maintaining physical activity in the form of resistance training just keeps you youthful for longer, and prolongs the health span, so to say. So you can maintain your youthfulness and self-reliance even in your later years. And bone density, increased muscle mass, increased insulin sensitivity, even cognition and mobility, all those things are improved the best by resistance training, because you don't get those same adaptations from doing cardio. Cardio isn't going to make you build muscle, and cardio isn't going to enhance your bones and to become stronger, so to say. So yeah, I'm primarily doing resistance training, but I also still incorporate some easy cardio. It's just not like my main focus, and I think that most people's goals would also be achieved better with resistance training instead of cardio.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you're preaching to the choir on that one. Like, I tell everyone to do resistance training, everyone to do strength training. I even feel like to a certain degree you can do strength and resistance training to the point where it starts to impact and improve your cardiovascular health. Like, I've done squat sessions where I feel like I'm more drained than if I was to go out for a run. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy, especially when I'm on programming. Like, one in particular did it to me was the Texas Method program. I would do these volume days, and it was like a 5x5 squat session at like 75 or 65%. Like, at the end of that, I would just be drained. I'd be like crawling on the ground, like dragging myself across the gym. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely a huge proponent of strength training. So I wanted to ask you about your supplementation regimen. Do you have any particular supplements that you lean towards, anything that are like your guaranteed go-to? For me, it tends to be like creatine and glutamine. I tend to like always have those things. And occasionally I'll have like BCAAs. But usually I rely on the amino acids from just food, like steaks and all that stuff. But Do you have any supplements that you use just on the regular and that they're your go-to?
Yeah, I actually do. Like, although I eat like a very nutrient-dense diet and high-quality ingredients, I still I use like different supplements that I think give you like an extra edge that you really can't get from nutrition for both like performance and longevity purposes. So, for example, creatine, yeah, is definitely one of the best or most well-researched supplement for both like physical performance and cognition, and I think it's definitely should be considered as like an anti-aging supplement as well, because creatine is used for energy production, ATP production, but it's also involved in the methylation cycle, and it's definitely like like another central component to just general metabolism and creating anything, creating energy and all those things. So creatine is one of those things that I take quite regularly. I may not take it like every day, but usually, yeah, like maybe every other day or something. And naturally I would go through different cycles of taking it and not taking it. So based on like my own gut feeling. But in addition to that, I also take some glutamine sometimes, like maybe not every day, but usually if I'm trying to, in the winter months, again, trying to boost the immune system, trying to keep the gut healthy, etc. But then again, another like you can get carnosine from like meat as well, but the amount of that you would have to be eating like a massive amount of meat to get like a good therapeutic dose of carnosine from that. So carnosine is also very good for is like an anti-aging supplement that buffers lactic acid and fights advanced glycation end products and those sort of things. So that's pretty useful that I take on a regular basis. Then there's also I take some digestive enzymes from biooptimizers, and they're also just good for improving digestion, but at the same time they can also be considered like an anti-aging supplement, because they're essentially helping to not only break down the food, but they also break down any of the food particles floating in your system, so to say. So if you take, I usually take them in a fasted state actually, instead of taking them with food, because while I'm fasting, then I don't have like the food waiting there to be broken down. So the digestive enzymes would just help to clear out the body from these food particles and nutrients faster, so that I would go into like a therapeutic state of autophagy also faster. So that's my rationale in that sense. But maybe another supplement that I would take is, let me think, some general, like usually in the evening I take like a magnesium, and maybe on some nights if I'm exposed to like blue light in the evening, or if I'm suffering from jet lag or something, then I also take like melatonin to fall asleep better. And recently I've been trying to experiment with some NAD boosters like nicotinamide riboside, and those seem to be also pretty effective. Or I do notice like a small difference, but I'm also like quite young, so my NAD levels are already pretty high. So as you get older, your NAD decreases, and because of that you will also suffer from like lackluster energy production and mitochondrial dysfunction. So keeping your NAD levels elevated throughout your lifetime is very good for extending health span and preventing like age-related diseases.
Mm-hmm. I actually don't think I take any of these supplements. That's something I might look into. Yeah. I don't think I've tried any. So I also want to ask you about cold therapy or hot therapy. Do you do either of those two things? I noticed that on your Instagram you did post some content where you were in an ice bath with some people. So do you do those things on a regular basis, either cold or hot, if sauna or anything like that?
I do take like a sauna pretty much almost every day, at least like an infrared sauna, and at the traditional sauna I do maybe like once or twice a week. So I'm a pretty huge fan of heat exposure, and I do cold less frequently, so to say. So I do keep like my house pretty low temperature, and I'm not like keeping the central heating on. So I do get naturally exposed to variations in temperature throughout the day. And I do go outside like with fewer clothes sometimes to kind of get some fresh air and get some cold. But I may do like once a week or once a week I will do like a cold shower session where I will just try to get this shivering response to activate brown fat and also just to create this hormetic effect through the cold. Currently I haven't been doing like regular ice baths because the closest nearby lake is quite far away, and I would have to just drive there and etc. So I would much rather get it over with like a cold shower. But I do usually I would maybe do like once a month. I would have like this plunge into a cold river or a lake or something, or an ice bath when I'm doing a sauna or something. So that's like the best combination in my opinion. Like when you're sitting in a sauna, you're getting your sweat on, and then you go into the cold and sit there for a few minutes. That's like the best feeling afterwards. And I also think you get a lot of these unique benefits, like you activate heat shock proteins from the heat, you reduce inflammation, and you kind of stimulate the lymph system. And when you go to the cold, then you also activate these other longevity pathways or longevity genes, like FOXO proteins, which are also associated with like higher stress adaptation, stronger immune system, reduced inflammation, and like increased lifespan. And if you do it like in this contrast manner, you go hot and cold, then afterwards when you go back into the heat, then like you feel amazing afterwards. Like your body just release you kind of feel like your blood starts to surge at this very rapid rate. And I think that it will promote more lymph flow, flushes out gets all the fluids moving, and just mentally it's also like you feel like $1,000,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that would have the same effect if you did like a hot shower and then a really cold shower that went back to the hot? Do you think it's similar?
Yeah, you would get some benefits from that, but I think it's definitely like a smaller degree. So a sauna is definitely a lot hotter than a warm shower or a hot shower, because although in a hot shower the water is going to start to burn you before it can get it too hot. Like in the sauna, you're sitting there and it's making you sweat, so it's like a slightly different. But you still get like the aspect of alteration between hot and cold from the shower.
Mm. Yeah, no, I don't have a sauna myself. I'm thinking my next house I'll probably build one. And I don't even really use the sauna too often, but I know it has tons of benefits, and I talk to lots of people that use it, so it's on my list. I definitely do the cold shower thing, but it's usually like I'll have a warm shower, and then I'll like during the warm shower I have to like mentally talk to myself to do the cold shower, because some days I'm just not up for it. Like I'm just thinking, well, I could skip it today, don't really have to, but like I always talk myself into it, and then after I just feel like amazing. So
Yeah,
one of those mental struggles, I guess.
I used to back in college. I used to take cold showers every day, every morning for like 2 years straight or something. And I did it even on days where I was like somewhat sick, but it was still like a mental exercise primarily. But afterwards I kind of started to realize that the contrast showers are a lot better, and they also feel better. So I started doing primarily those ones. So doing the hot and the cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think I could do like 2 years, multiple years every single day. Like some days I just skip, especially now we have winter. So it's like, although when I do take the cold shower and I go outside, I'm like, it's not that cold out, like it doesn't feel as bad when you actually do it. And we're about to have like really crazy winter here with like ice and everything. So when that happens, we're going to go take a plunge in the lake, because that's just absolutely, that's the coldest I've ever been in my life, is going into like Lake Ontario when it's like iced over at the shorelines. It's crazy. So I want to ask you about your meditation. If you have any meditation routine that you employ either on a daily basis, weekly basis, it doesn't have to be like sitting cross-legged lotus. It could just be walking around with mindfulness. But do you have anything that you practice?
I used to meditate more like on a consistent basis. I used to do like transcendental meditation, but at the moment I haven't been doing it that consistently. So I don't like usually. Before that, I would be, sitting in the morning right after waking up and meditate for like 20 to 30 minutes. But nowadays, I don't really feel that I need to do it, so to say. And I'm kind of implementing these, small pockets of meditation throughout my entire day. And I think the main idea is to kind of try to experience this stillness of mind as well as just complete presence and mindfulness. And I do experience those states when I'm like writing something every once in a while, when I'm exercising, doing some yoga or handstands, and even like when I'm, you know, brewing a cup of tea or something. So I'll just always have like this small reminder as a habit that if I have like this small dull moment in a given day, then I'll just try to take a step back and, you know, just to pay attention of what goes on and just, yeah, like to observe for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I've been leaning towards as well, is not so much having like designated times, but I've been doing a lot of just, if I don't have anything to do for the next 5-15 minutes, it's like I'll do that, you know, because I'll come out of that, and it's a lot better than taking these, you know, devices and staring at them for 15 minutes. I feel like these things are energy sapping, you know, like they drain the energy. Whereas if I was to go and do like some sort of, you know, quiet meditation or just, you know, just still the mind, as you were saying, I come out of that and I just feel a little bit like I have more energy, like I feel a little bit more invigorated than if I was to just stare at my phone. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been leaning towards as well. Previously, I was doing like a morning meditation and an evening one. And that's not to say I'll go away from those, but I think I like what you're saying is just to have that throughout the day and just have those little pockets that you can slide in some meditation time. Because I feel like it's something that, like, you have so much information all over us all day long that it's like we need to slide in those little things just to break up the craziness of all that information overload.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you as well about psychedelics, if you've had any psychedelic experiences, you know, if you want to share those.
No, I don't actually. Like, I haven't taken any ayahuasca or LSD or something. I have like taken a small amount of magic mushrooms, but I didn't notice like a huge difference. So I'm kind of a rookie when it comes to psychedelics and such. And so far I haven't felt the need to take them either, so to say. So I think most people expect to get some, you know, miraculous, I don't know, epiphany from them or some sort of a, yeah, like transformation. But I think those things they're not going to work unless you do the work, so to say, or unless you haven't done the work before that. So, you know, all the other things that we talked about so far, such as discipline, having certain routines, taking care of your health, being productive, and being mindful, all those things are kind of prerequisites that you need to have in place, and those things need to be really solid before you can kind of delve into those psychedelic realms.
Mm-hmm. I find a lot of people use the psychedelics, but they don't do the daily work. They don't have any practice. Yeah. They're, you know, doing anything really. It's like they'll just do their 9-to-5 regular mundane routines, and then they'll go do some psychedelics, and they don't really take much back from that. Like, I know a lot of friends of mine, it's exactly like that. Whereas the people that don't use it too often, but do have a daily practice, I find that, yeah, they're a little bit more equipped to deal with any sort of experience they may have while on psychedelics. I mean, I've done psychedelics many times, different types, but I feel like it's overwhelming if I wasn't already doing the work on a day-to-day basis. I'm not sure what I would take away from that. It would just be confusing to me. And then I might just feel the need to go back to understand it again. But I just think that defeats the purpose of just living and doing that work on a day-to-day basis. Right. So I want to just quickly ask some questions here that were asked on Instagram that I posted earlier today to see if anyone was had any questions for you. All right, so someone asked, here I'll give you their name. Amber Rosie asked, what is one piece of advice or habit you wish to, that you adapted sooner to improve your body and mind? I'm not sure that was worded correctly, but basically what's one piece of advice or habit to improve body and mind that you would suggest or you would recommend?
I think that I wish I learned how to meditate sooner, so to say. And yeah, like if I say meditate, then I'm not necessarily meaning like this, yeah, sitting with your crossed legs. I think I kind of refer to it, yeah, to this general ability to sit in the moment and just observe and become like meta-aware that you are aware, or that you're observing how you observe and what kind of a state are you in, so to say, so that you can just self-analyze what goes on inside yourself and just be in the moment without like any distractions, etc. So that's what I would want. I wish I would have learned that ability like already in in my school and high school and those sort of things. So yeah, if you could teach your children like any meditation practice or just mindfulness practice as soon as possible, then it would drastically accelerate their success and accelerate everything else that they would like to accomplish in their life.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice. When I was younger, I didn't really do any of that stuff, and I think it would help in terms of at least giving a younger person, guiding them in the direction that they may want to go, guiding them toward their passions or what do they want to achieve in life. So the next question is, how do you get your body fat adapted, and how do you know when your body is fat adapted?
Yeah, good question. And you get fat adapted by primarily doing some form of intermittent fasting, as well as just reducing your carb intake to a certain extent and controlling it based on the requirements. So if you are physically very active, then you can get away with more carbs, whereas if you're like insulin resistant and you're sedentary, then you probably can't eat any carbs at all almost. So yeah, it depends a lot on the person, but generally some form of actually like slow like low intensity cardio can be a good promoter of fat adaptation, because while you're doing cardio, your body is burning fat for fuel, and that just improves the mitochondria's efficiency to use that fat for fuel. And yeah, like some even on a like probably if I looking back then now, the way I became more fat adapted was to do like a low intensity cardio either in a fasted state or after eating like a low carb ketogenic meal, so to say. So you're in this ketogenic state and in ketosis, and then you increase the exercise demand. So then your body is just forced to ramp up its ability to use fat for fuel. And the way you know that you've made it, or there's no, with fat adaptation there's not like this specific point that you reach, whereas with ketones you can measure how many ketones you have. But with fat adaptation it's more of like a matter of degree. The more you do it, the better it gets, or the easier it gets. But some things to notice are just mental well-being and focus during a fast. So if you're not feeling tired, you're not feeling hypoglycemic, and you don't have like energy crashes throughout the day, then that means your body is at least like it's more metabolically flexible in some aspects, so it's able to swap in between fuel sources and tap into its own body fat for fuel. So you can even be fat adapted while eating carbs. You just have to condition yourself to make the switch more easily.
All right, perfect. And one more question, and then I'll hop off this Instagram thing. This one, I don't know if you know how to answer it, but this person, I'll give you their name. I don't even know how to pronounce it. It looks like Paladin, spelled with a 3. Doesn't like to be told what to do. How does he handle people who keep pushing his limits? So basically, just doesn't like being told what to do. I guess he wants just to be more confident in himself, in his own skin, and his own decisions. And he just, so do you have any advice for that?
I think that like people tend to treat you the way you've taught them to treat you. So if someone is telling you all the time what to do, then it's probably because either that you haven't shown the, I don't know, self-resourcefulness or self-willingness to do your own things, or they're just like a toxic person or something. So in any case, you would the way you can overcome that isn't to become more toxic yourself or to insult them or try to do something offensive. I think the way you overcome that is to become just take more responsibility over your own habits and take responsibility over everything you do. So just become more self-reliant, self-resourceful. Jordan Peterson has a amazing advice about this, such as like rule number 1 is stand up straight with your shoulders back, and I think he's also saying like clean up your room. And so those are the small things, like if you have to just be responsible for everything you do, like including your grooming, self-hygiene, your fitness, your finance, your, I don't know, overall productivity, your success, everything else. You just have to take full control over it and just optimize it.
Yeah, I do like Jordan Peterson's simple approach to it. And I did read that book. And, you know, I actually expected more from the book because I got so much out of his lectures. Like, I don't know if you've seen his lecture series, but it's extremely long. Like, it's like 20 hours for just one series. I think he did like a 15-hour series just breaking down Pinocchio, like the story of Pinocchio. It's it's funny too because he's a University of Toronto, or former University of Toronto professor. So not too far from me. I actually wanted to go down there a couple times to see some of his lectures in person before they blew up, because he was charging like $25 just to sit in on a lecture, whereas now it's like, I don't know, like probably $200. And it's some big, huge hall that they're doing. So, you know, I'm a little upset with myself. I didn't go when it was smaller, but, you know, I'm glad to see people like him just blowing up and getting so popular. So yeah, there's no more questions from Instagram. I just want to ask you if you have any closing thoughts for anyone that's listening to this, that's just looking to improve themselves. I think you covered a lot in your last response even, and I'm sure in a lot of other answers you gave earlier in this episode. But do you have any closing thoughts for anyone that's listening to this, or anything you wanted to plug?
Well, I think that on the topic of what we talked about, then just becoming more self-reliant and as well as more resilient as a person, so to say. So all these biohacks and fasting and cold and heat, they strengthen your body, but they also strengthen your mind. And in order to, you know, be healthier, health is almost, in some aspects, like living longer is also like a side effect of being tougher, so to say. So that's why calorie restriction, and that's why fasting and cold and exercise and heat, that's why they promote lifespan and longevity. You know, your body becomes tougher and your body just survives for longer. So if you apply that same mentality in your daily life and outside of health, like, you know, your relationships or your productivity and financial success, those things, then you would definitely see like much more improvement and more results.
Great piece of advice. So where can people find you if they want to subscribe to your YouTube channel, your Instagram, or anything else?
Yeah, well, my YouTube is Siimland, my Instagram is also Siimland, and my website is siimland.com. So it's pretty easy.
So I'll include those links in the description of this episode, as well as the link to your latest book, because I think you're offering that to people just for the cost of shipping and print. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. People have to pay for the printing and the shipping costs, and they'll get it for free.
Perfect. That's a great way to get it into people's hands. So thank you for taking the time today, and I'll let you know as soon as this is up, and maybe we can do it again sometime. I look forward to seeing what else you're producing on your YouTube channel, and good luck hitting 100,000 subscribers. I look forward to seeing that as well. And then next is 100,000 on Instagram, and you go towards 1 million, and I'm excited to see you sharing all this great content with people.